So, do you have any advices on how to become a good poker player?
Well, sure. The question is, what type of money are you trying to earn, I guess. To become a good poker player, there's a good poker player and a profitable poker player are usually the same thing, but sometimes it depends on which road you're going to take to become a good player. The general advice would be to spend a lot of time analyzing your play and not just playing. So, I mean, it's tempting when you're in a groove and you're playing online, you just want to keep playing until your eyes go red.
Yeah.
And that's good, you need to play a lot, but you also need to analyze your play as much as possible. So I don't know what the ratio is. I would say maybe somewhere about half or 2/3 playing with 1/3 to 1/2 analyzing. And there's different ways of analyzing. I can go into that later if you'd like.
Yeah, so maybe you can tell us what tools should we choose to play?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of poker tools based on many different things. First of all, there's a big difference between online and live poker. I would suggest to anybody who wants to be a good live player to play online a ton. So most of what I'm going to talk about here today, I guess, is going to be online poker and what you could do to become good at that, because live poker is still a lot easier. But that's another thing, I'll get there in the end.
Okay.
For online poker, if you're just starting out, I guess, and you haven't really played poker professionally, you're going to want to have, you're going to want to analyze hand ranges of your opponents and really start thinking in equity. In other words, your percentage that your hand, how your hand is doing against a range of hands, because people always have more than one hand.
Yeah.
You know, it's common for beginners to say, oh, I put him on ace-jack. Well, he might have ace-jack, but what's the rest of his range?
Yeah.
So the basic software for that is free and pretty good. Poker Stove is one of the first ones, where you can select all the different possible hands you think your opponent has, and then calculate your hand against that hand. It will give you the percentage, your equity, against those hands. A more advanced version of that would be Flopzilla. Same concept, more advanced version. And that is very good. Once you become a lot better, you're going to, one of the most important things is to have a HUD if you're playing online. A HUD shows you all the statistics of your opponents and how they are playing. What is their range, like how aggressive they are, but not just how aggressive, like after the flop, how often do they continuation bet, C-bet, how often do they do, like anything. You can customize your HUD to have as much information as you would like, and it's a bunch of numbers next to all the people at the table. Now, at some point that might become illegal, but in the meantime, while that is legal online, everybody should pretty much be using it if they're trying to make a profit playing poker. So the names, you can find these HUDs by downloading Poker Tracker. That's really good. Hold'em Manager is also very good. Right. If you have Hold'em Manager or Poker Tracker, a very good thing is that you can have your hand histories saved. So you can have thousands of hands saved, and you can analyze these later. How you analyze your hands is the critical part of becoming a better poker player. At first, I think, before you even know how to analyze hands, it's good to use the resources that are available to everybody now. Watch YouTube videos, see how professional poker players think through hands and through different decisions. Play around with Poker Stove a lot, like I was saying, so you understand the basics of equity, and then understanding what semi-bluffs are, all the basics to understanding you know, the value of certain bluffs, the value of certain plays, what those plays mean. The software is only useful once you have a basic understanding. So right now I'm not sure, you know, if we're giving advice to really beginner players, I guess it's pretty simple, which is to download, I would say, just Poker Stove, play around with a ton of hands, watch a ton of videos online, and play very, very small stakes and see if you can make a living at that. When I say micro stakes, I mean like 1 cent, 2 cent, and I would say 100 buy-ins is very conservative, but very good to have. So if you have $200, you can play like 1 cent, 2 cent stakes and play a few tables at a time. See if you can make a profit at that. If you can't make a profit at that, then maybe you're not ready for the next step. Once you're understanding how those things go, you know, how to make a small profit, At the same time, you should be looking at a lot of videos on how to play different things. Then you'll know what to do with the HUD. You'll know what to do when you download Poker Tracker. You know, you'll know what information is important. You'll know how to set up your HUD properly. And at that point, you can import, or export rather, hands from those programs with all your saved hand history, and go to, like I was saying, decision tree technology is good, like with card runners. Card runners EV is pretty cool. I've seen that. That works really well. I know a lot of players who use that and can calculate pretty deeply to the river what the different possibilities would be. Every decision changes the different part of the tree, and you can calculate your equity and basically come up with simple questions like, on the turn, with the board being this type of board, with this hand, what is my equity versus the man's range based on these moves? So it's pretty complicated, but that's, if you're an advanced player, eventually you're going to be wanting to use that software to stay up to date with the game, I guess.
So all the tools mentioned by you are connected with some kind of strategy also. Do you have any strategy?
Yeah, well, first of all, game selection is very important, and that's like how to find, you know, how to become the best poker player is a different thing than how to make the most money sometimes.
Yeah.
If you're going to ask me what is the best way to make money playing poker, I'd have to say try to play live poker as quickly as possible, because online poker has become very, very hard the last years. It's still possible to make a profit if you really are treating it like university and you take it very seriously. I think if you're a beginner, you can become, you know, a winning micro stakes player within a few months if you really go about the right thing. But software is only going to be good at a certain point. Like, you need to understand the basics first and spend a lot of time looking at videos. And here's the next part, discussing hands. The best way to discuss a ton of hands is to join certain communities. The 2+2 poker community is very good for analyzing hands. So is Poker Strategy. These are good places where you can load hands that you've played and discuss them, or comment on hands that other people play. Get involved in discussions, because it's very important before you can really use any software properly to understand how to think forward in a hand, how to plan for all four streets, how to plan for pre-flop, flop, turn, and river. So being involved in those communities is a very good way to start out if you don't really have any other friends who are professional poker players.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the money is an integral part of playing poker.
Yep.
And how should we manage our money during the poker play?
There are some general tips which you know, are guidelines that I think are pretty good. I would say anywhere from 50 to 100 buy-ins is what you should have to be pretty safe with the stakes that you're playing. So if you're playing 5 cent, 10 cent, that would mean that a buy-in would be $10. They call that NL10. I guess that's high stakes, micro stakes.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're going to be playing like NL10, which would be, you can make a pretty good living doing that actually, if you're going to play a lot of tables at that. And actually that's pretty tough these days. It is, seriously, like people have gotten better. Even at NL10, you would need, let's say, if 100 buy-ins would be what? Would that be $1,000? Yeah, $1,000 if you're going to play 5 cent, 10 cent. That would be really safe. And if you're going to be losing, you know, a lot, and let's say your bankroll would go down from $1,000 to, let's say, I don't know what, 800, 700, somewhere in that range, depending on how you feel you've been playing, and depending on what your software says, you should go back down, I guess, then to smaller stakes, 2 cent, 5 cent, or eventually go down to 1 cent, 2 cent to see if you could beat that, which I think is still very, very beatable.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you are asked to choose the best form of playing poker, what would it be?
Yeah, ultimately I'd have to say live poker, and I can say some interesting things about that, because the best way to be profitable at that is not involving poker. That's involving how you spend your money when you're traveling and how to minimize your expenses. Because by far, the weakest players you're ever going to meet are some gambler types who show up at the casino and, you know, just blow their money. But it costs a lot of money to travel certain places and to live there. And it's interesting. A good friend of mine, Faraz Jaka, we have lived together in many houses and traveled a lot. He is one of the better poker players with managing money. That's why he's been in the game. He's been a tournament player for many years, and it's interesting because tournaments are a very hard way to make money because you need to always hit the top few places to be very profitable, and that's usually not going to happen, and that might not happen for years. So you need a lot of patience and you need to learn how to minimize costs. That's a good way to earn a lot of money. If you hit like the top few places, you're getting a ton of money, but if not, it's very hard to be profitable. Cash games, of course, are a lot more consistent. But if you're going to go play live cash games, you need to really cut down on the costs. In other words, maybe if you're doing that, you're probably a winning online small stakes player. But if you're winning consistently, like making $1,000 or $2,000 a month on playing micro stakes, like even 5 cent, 10 cent, 10 cent, 25 cent, I think winning players at those low levels these days could still be having a big edge. If they're really winning players at those stakes, they could make a lot more money by playing live poker. By playing $1, $2 live, you might be able to make a lot more money. And for that, you'd have to travel. There's a lot of places. I would really recommend the country of France in many ways, although the taxes and rake are high. That, once again, that depends on how much money the casino's taking. But live poker, live cash, is one of the best. Some of the softest games I've seen were actually in Berlin at the Spielbank, but I'm not going to single them out as the weakest ever, but I mean, I've seen some incredible things there over the years, and I've seen, but you can see some really good spots where I think a lot of your money comes from being down at the table and having some drunk guy or a guy who's just a gambler give away a ton of money. And that happens less and less. You won't find that much online anymore. But you will find that live still in some places if you look hard enough. But you have to be cheap in your travels. So that's the ultimate way. But if we're just talking online, I would say there's really good value in playing like 180-man sit and goes, like on PokerStars, for example. I think there's a lot of good value in playing mixed games. Now, this is something which is not most people when they think poker, they only think Hold'em or Omaha now a little bit. But mixed games, there's still a lot of place to make. Like, not many people are good at playing mixed games at all. There's still an opportunity to play, 7-card stud or Raz or those type of games and make a good profit. As for no limit Hold'em, if we're just talking Hold'em, I would say cash games are still probably the most consistent way to make money. Especially if you're European, tournaments are a little bit hard because of the hours. Like, if you want to play an online schedule and you're going to make a final table, you're going to be having to be up till 6 or 7 a.m. a lot of the time. That's really hard to play well then. If you're living in the west coast of Canada, I think that's probably the ideal place to play tournament poker. But tournament poker, like I was saying, is very hard to make a consistent profit in because you need to be at the very top consistently, and that's a lot of luck. Most of the time, you're going to finish between like 30th and 3rd, like 10 times more often than you finish between 3rd and 1st, if you think about it mathematically. So if you go through thousands of players, and then your one big deep run that night or that week was 30th place, that's how it's usually going to be. Usually you're going to have a break-even or losing session, and only rarely are you going to win. So tournament poker is tough. You have to be willing to drip away like a couple of % of your bankroll every time and then a huge score, or not a huge score. That's why cash games are more consistent. In short, I would really say that cash games have much tougher players. I think tournament players, generally speaking, are a lot less skilled in poker. That's a huge statement to make, but I think you don't get to play so deep as you do in cash games. In cash games, you can often play hundreds of big blinds deep. And because there is less luck involved, because it's more consistent money, let's say, I think you find more regulars making their income there. And that is something. So as I say, it's a counterbalance. These days online, there's value to be found anywhere, but you have to experiment and keep trying and keep moving around. So you might have to try try everything when you're starting out. Try sit and goes, try cash games, try tournaments, get a taste for everything, and don't keep moving. Don't stop moving. I meant. Don't keep moving. No, don't stop moving. In other words, you have to these days, especially, I think you have to continue to test out the different fields and see. It depends on the site, depends on the time of day. If you're playing recreational players more on Sundays, or you have to really try different things and chart your progress. And that's the most important part by far of all of this, I think, this is what I'm saying about spending just as much time thinking about the game and analyzing it as playing. Whether or not it's thinking about game selection, like I said, by experimenting, playing all those different forms of poker and seeing which ones are the softest. Talking about that with other poker players. If you become a regular poker player, you can quite easily find a group of people through these poker communities, like I said, 2+2 or poker strategy. You could find a group of people together to have Skype calls. That's really good for analyzing and having weekly calls or more often than that, where you speak about all of these things and go and try to make money,
Good luck, yeah?
Yeah, good luck on that. It's important to stay involved with other players and see their thoughts. You have to have your own concepts of the game that are unique to you, because if everybody thinks the same way, where's the profit in a game that's ultimately where most of the money in the end goes towards the casinos, right? You want to make a profit, you need to be well ahead of the game, and that requires you thinking your own way, and most importantly, staying up to date with what the other regulars are thinking.
Okay. That's all.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.